Philippine markets and the economy. Sitting in for Cathy Yang, I'm Danny Laurel. Now, in the headlines, the International Monetary Fund urges the Bangko Sentral to closely monitor the exposure of banks to the manufacturing and public sectors, still because of global trade uncertainties. But despite these uncertainties, the country's semiconductor industry sees exports to have a double-digit growth. We speak to SAPI President Dan Lachica in just a few minutes. And guys, it is the last day of the year. We check on how Filipinos are preparing to welcome 2026. The International Monetary Fund urges the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to keep a close watch on banks' exposure to manufacturing and public sectors that's amid global trade uncertainties. In a report, the IMF said loans to factories could pose risks if global trade conditions worsen given weak earnings in the sector. It also flagged high vacancies in commercial properties following the exit of offshore gaming operators and rapid growth in consumer credit at a time when household savings remain low. The multilateral lender noted that manufacturing and wholesale retail loans account for about 19% of total bank lending at the end of August. These sectors are seen as vulnerable to global trade shocks, including the 19% U.S. tariffs on Philippine exports. The IMF added that rising household debt and increased bank exposure to the public sector also warrant close monitoring. The Trade Department says the Philippines plans to use its ASEAN chairmanship in 2026 to strengthen trade and investment ties across the region. Trade Secretary Cristina Roque said hosting ASEAN will give partner countries a first-hand look at the country's business environment and regulatory landscape. She said the government is planning a major business matching push with priority sectors including renewable energies, minerals, and semiconductors. The agency will also highlight the creative economy, women-led enterprises, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as digital and AI-driven industries. She adds the Philippines is moving to conclude talks on the ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement. Negotiations, which began in 2021, are expected to expand market access and boost investment flows, especially for Philippine electronics and agricultural exports. Now, 2025 was not the most stellar year for markets nor the local economy, but we end the year with a dose of good news that's coming from the semiconductor space. And here to bear that, we have with us Dan Lachica, President of the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation Incorporated. Dan, so good to see you, and I leave it to you to tell us the good news for the year. Please, go ahead.
Well, first of all, good morning, Danny, and your viewers. Happy New Year. We closed the year with some good news. We started the year with a projection of flat growth, given the global challenges, the geopolitical situation, and of course, the U.S. tariff. And we've been conservative through the whole year, but it looks like it would be safe to say that we're going to close the year with double-digit growth, far exceeding our expectations. From 2024 numbers of $42.6 billion, we expect to reach anywhere between $48 to $49 billion to close the year.
That's incredible. So that represents, if I'm not mistaken, 23% growth. And that comes from your initial estimate, Dan, of 5 to 7%. Why the major surprise? Tell us what were the positive catalysts.
Well, actually, it's right now we're tracking about 14% according to the PSA report. And so maybe 14 to 15%, which really, like you said, surpasses our growth. We were conservative, but then again, strong demand in the commercial industrial products, automotive, and of course, semiconductors, which everybody and everything uses for the devices today, spurred that growth.
Okay, you mentioned that you did not expect this, or at least you were conservative. Was this a one-off situation this year, or does this surge have legs, especially as we go into the new year?
Well, going into the first semester, our expectations were tempered because obviously, while we were promoting Create More, we got hit with the news of the U.S. Tariffs, and so the continuing geopolitical upheaval around the world also tempered that expectations. But then again, we were seeing some movement from July, the second semester onward. But then again, the volatility of the U.S. tariffs kind of kept us from announcing some positive growth. As you know, we didn't want to set false expectations. We'd rather perform rather than give false news and, like I said, set false expectations. We'd rather over deliver rather than underperform.
But can you give an indication of whether we will, now that this is clearer, no, will we be seeing the same double-digit growth at least for next year? What are your new projections for 2026?
Well, it's not really that clear. Part of the upside, if you will, would be the 0% tariff on semiconductors. I'm referring to the U.S. tariff, right?
Okay.
What you mentioned earlier, the country is seeing a 19% reciprocal tariff. Semiconductors and some selected EMS products are still enjoying that 0% owing to the Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act. But as everybody might know, or maybe didn't know, the U.S. is still reviewing that policy, and at any given time, that may change. And so that's what's tempering our expectations and the forecast. For 2026, we have forecasted conservative 5% growth over what we export in 2025, which, like I said, may land between $48 and $49 billion. Still, the country's top commodity exports numbering about 59 to 60% of our exports.
Can you clarify the 0% tariff? Do you mean that for semiconductors, we're not being slapped the 19% tariff that the rest of our products or exports have? And do you think that the U.S. government has incentive to keep this 0% tariff, or really there's no clarity on that?
There's still no clarity. And by the way, we're not the only country that enjoys that 0% tariff for semiconductors and some selected electronics products. And the reason for that is that with this, as I mentioned, Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act basically describes products that are integral or important to U.S. security and commercial interests.
Great.
That being said, obviously, semiconductors coming out of the Philippines plays a major role. And that's why for now, we have that 0% tariff that we're utilizing and, of course, taking advantage of.
For the peso, did that play a role this year? And how are you seeing that evolve next year?
Well, ironically, sad to say, it's actually good or bad depending on how you look at it. With the depreciation of the peso, that's actually favorable to exporters, right? Because we are dollar-denominated industry, so especially when we buy local parts and although that's about 60% of our raw materials are a mix of local and imported, mostly imported. That's about $30 billion, and so we have a parts localization program. But again, as far as local expenses, utilities, power costs, which is still expensive, we pay in pesos. So, it's about, I would say about 0.3 or 0.4% benefit for our industry if with the lower peso.
Mm-hmm. Can we shift from the U.S. to the local industry and expanding that here in the Philippines? I mean, we've been talking about this for many years. You were pushing back on higher taxation, on loss of incentives. What is the government doing now to support the sector? Have you at least resolved some of those issues?
Well, we're optimistic and looking forward to the impact of Create More, especially with the renewed confidence in PESA, which is our main, uh, I guess, partner in government, and DTI, of course. But then again, with all these things that are going on, the corruption and all the distractions, and of course, ARTA also is helping a lot in terms of the ease of doing business. But this corruption issue with the ghost projects that's also hampered the confidence in the country. I'm optimistic that the new BIR commissioner, Attorney Charlie, would hopefully be able to do a lot in terms of reducing, if not eliminating, corruption altogether. But all this distraction still, kind of hamper the growth of our industry. The other thing that we need to do is go up the value chain. And in semiconductors, if you look at the semiconductor supply chain, we have a big gap in that supply chain for the Philippines. Of course, we're strong in assembly, test, and packaging. However, while we are promoting the growth of the IC design industry, there's a big gap between IC design and back-end assembly, test, and packaging, and that is the wafer fabrication part of it. Of course, yeah, we can't go from nothing to commercial wafer fab. So we have suggested that we have actually submitted to DOST a proposal for a lab scale wafer fab to get us started, train the talent, and of course develop the capability, show a proof of concept, so that eventually we can attract investors in a commercial wafer fab, which is admittedly quite prohibitive, quite expensive. And at this point, we have to show that we have the ecosystem and the capability to support that.
Dan, can you nuance a little bit? I'm sure you are on a day-to-day basis talking with these foreign investors. You're very outward-looking about this whole corruption issue. What is being asked about here for them to feel more confidence in investing? What is your ask to the government? Yeah.
The extent of our conversations with investors would be what our members deal with in terms of customers and future investors. The heavy work has to be done by government, showing that we're serious about the pursuit of this violators, of these corrupt officials. And yes, we are seeing a lot of activities, but then again, where are the convictions? And I'm not talking about the small fry, right? The small fries. I'm talking about the significant corrupt officials who availed of these ghost projects and raked in a lot of money. And so I think that's what investors are looking for. We have received concerns, feedback from our members that that's the question that's asked them. What is the Philippines going to do, or specifically, what are you as a company, especially the multinationals, doing about this corruption issue? And all we can do really is, from our end, we work on the things that we can control, improving efficiency, improving delivery. But then again, we really need to look at government to make sure that there is a definitive actions on this allegations and issues of corruption.
Before we let you go, Dan, we are set to chair the ASEAN in 2026, and we have the DTI's Christina Roca mentioning that as part of the strategy, there's going to be this business matching initiative, and she actually singled out semiconductor industry. What's going to be your participation there, and how do you hope to leverage on the ASEAN leadership this year?
Well, initially I was kind of concerned because when I looked at the original agenda or program for ASEAN, there was no mention of semiconductors. And that's a major concern. Like I said, we account for nearly 60% of the country's exports, and not to include semiconductors in the agenda would be a big mistake. And I'm not just talking about mentioning semiconductors, because initially, the next revision I saw was what we call this prioritized economic drivers. The government has a list of about 10 or so, or 16, I believe. And I did see semiconductors, but it was stated as attract investors in semiconductors? Well, my concern is how can we attract investments if we don't improve the investment environment, if we don't have value propositions for the semiconductor industry? So we're talking to the ABAC, of course, Chairman Joey Concepcion, and also reaching out to DTI and again DOST to hopefully make that as a specific part of the program. I was in Malaysia, I guess 2 months ago, and as you know, they chaired 2025, and there was this ASEAN Semiconductor Initiative. They called it ASEMIS, and I was impressed with what they did. There was a whole program, there was a whole slew of initiatives, and there was visible support from the Prime Minister. But I haven't quite seen the program for that, so I'm reaching out to government, requesting government. By the way, this countries, we signed an MOU with 4 other countries in ASEAN, and they're basically saying, SAPI, why don't you chair the ASEAN initiative for semiconductors? We call it ASEMIS, and do it in the Philippines when you chair it. And so I haven't really firmed up, what we're going to do about it, other than what, again, SAPI controls. And that is when we do our PSECE October 26 to 28, we're going to put an ASEAN flavor there. In other words, we're going to be inviting our 4 ASEAN association partners from Malaysia, from Thailand, from Vietnam, and Singapore. And we're just going to do our best to ensure that the semiconductors is promoted in our ASEAN community. So October 26 to 28, the 26th, hopefully the president and the cabinet members can join us. And maybe we'll invite you too, Danny, to help us.
Please do. Promote that. Absolutely. We will be there to cover that. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much for spending the last day of 2025 with some good news with us. Dan La Chica, President of the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation Incorporated. You are watching Money Talks, now coming right up. Pop Mart's share slid following reports of waning demand for Labubu toys. And let's check on the sales of fireworks as we prepare to welcome 2026. Keep it here on One News. Live ba?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Pahayag nga daw kay Julie, ma'am.
And welcome back to Money Talks. It is the last day of 2025 and our kapatids are doing their last-minute shopping and travels. Our mobile journalists are situated in key locations to monitor that situation. Julie Baiza is in Bocaue, Bulacan. That's dubbed as the country's fireworks capital. Jazz Paredes is in a wet market in Pasig City, while Evan Tarinque is at the Pete X. And with just hours before the new year, firecracker sales are picking up over in Bocaue, Bulacan. That's one of the country's busiest hubs for pyrotechnics. Let's get the update straight from Mobile Journal, Julie Baiza. Now reporting live on the ground. Julie, kamusta dyan? Very busy ba?
Dani, patuloy ang pagdating ng mga namimili ng paputok at fireworks dito sa Bukawi, Bulacan. As early as 6 a.m., marami na yung nadat na nating bumibili dito. Sabi ng mga tendero, pinakamabenta raw yung fountain, fireworks at lucis. Naglalaro sa 150 pesos hanggang 1,500 pesos yung presyo ng fountain. Sa fireworks, pinakamababa naman yung 900 pesos habang yung luces nasa 50 pesos hanggang 250 pesos naman. Ilan sa mga kapatid natin naglaan daw ng 5,000 to 10,000 pesos para ipambili ng fireworks at ibang pailaw. Nakasanayan na raw kasi yan at pampaswerte rin sa pagpasok ng taon. Pagdating naman sa security, patuloy ang pagbabantay ng mga tauhan ng Bureau of Fire Protections para matiyak na walang naninigarilyo sa paligid nitong bilihan. May nakapaskil na off-plan ingat paputok, no smoking at no testing. Required din yung bawat tindahan na magkaroon ng drum ng tubig at fire extinguisher. Bukod sa mga ito, may leaflets din na ipinamamahagi ang BFP na nagpapaalala na mag-ingat ang publiko sa mga peking paputok at siguraduhin ilalagay ito sa tuyo at saradong lugar. Kung may paputok na hindi sumabog, wag na raw tangkain na sindihan ulit. Maghintay lang ng 15 to 20 minutes bago buhusan ng tubig. Hinihikayat naman ng publiko na hanggat maaari, huwag nang gumamit ng paputok at mga pailaw. Magtorotot na lang daw o gumamit ng ibang alternatibong paraan. Dani.
Alright, pero syempre may kailangan pa rin ng business, no, dyan sa Bukawi. But once again, if you plan to buy that, please, mag-ingat po kayo. Thank you so much. That was Mobile Journal. Julie Baiza reporting to us from Bukawi, Bulacan. And shoppers are making last-minute purchases at the public markets as families complete their medianoche preparations. Let's check in at the situation over at the Pasig Public Market. We have with us Mobile Journal Jazz Paredes. Jazz, how are the prices holding up today?
Dani, tagsana nga ang mga mamimili dito sa Pasig Mega Market para mag last-minute shopping ng para sa medianoche mamaya. Ang una dyan sa listahan ay yung mga bilog na putas, pampaswerte para sa medianoche. Para sa mga presyo, ang ilan sa mga prutas ay nagtaas na nga. Kagaya ng longgan na 220 pesos per kilo na 200 pesos lamang dati. Ang kiwi na 50 per peraso, 45 pesos lang dati. Ang mangga na 240 pesos per kilo, 180 pesos lang ang presyo dati. At ang 240 pesos na ubas dati ay 280 pesos na ang kilo ngayon. At habang naman sa mga iba pang bilog na prutas, ay ito naman yung kanilang mga presyo. Kagaya ng mansanas na 3 for 100, ganun din sa peras. Ang saging gaya ng lakatan, 70 pesos per kilo. Ang pinya, 160 pesos per peraso. Pakuan, 180 pesos. Melon, 160 pesos. At mabenta na rin yung buko na sahog sa buko salad na isa sa mga paboritong ihain ngayong bagong taon. Nagkakahalaga ito ng 200 pesos per kilo. At ayon sa mga tinderang nakausap natin, Dani, no, maaari daw bumalik ito sa regular price pagkatapos ng bagong taon. Pero nagsimula daw talagang tumaas ang presyo ng mga bilog na prutas kahapon at meron din namang ilan na nagtaas na December 28 pa lamang. At bukod sa mga bilog na prutas, Dani, no, mabili na rin yung mga gulay at particular na yung mga gayat o yung mga nakapak na gulay dahil nga medyo mataas ang presyo ng mga ito, ay mas pinipili nila na bumili na lang ng mga nakatingin na kagaya na lamang ng gayat na mga panggisa na 200 pesos per kilo at yung mga tingi na nasa isang balot ay 35 pesos pagkabibilin. Usually ginagamit daw ito talaga yung mga pangsahog sa kaldereta. At syempre yung mga presyo ng karne din at ito na yung mga recent na natanong natin dito, Dani, no? Ang baboy 450 pesos per kilo. Pinakamabenta ngayon daw talaga ay yung pulo ng baboy na 250 pesos per kilo. Ang isda, 110 pesos ang per kilo ng tilapia, 175 per kilo naman ng bangus at 500 pesos naman per kilo ng hipon. Habang ang manok na sariwa, 180 pesos per kilo at kung frozen naman, 170 pesos per kilo. At syempre mabibili din dito ang baka na 480 pesos per kilo. At ayon sa mga magtitinda dito, Dani, simula kagabi parang sila bukas. Kaya naman asahan na kung meron daw mga magda-last minute shopping at mga nagbabalak pang mamili dito sa Pasig Mega Market ay mas mabuting humabol na daw ngayon dahil ang ilan sa kanila, alas 12 pa lang ng tanghali, posibleng magsara na ng tindahan. Meron pa rin namang magbubukas mamayang gabi, ngunit baka daw asahan na bandang alas 9 ay wala na masyadong bukas sa tindahan nito dahil pupunta rin o uuwi rin sa kanilang mga pamilya ang mga magtitinda para mag-spend ng bagong taon. Pagdating naman sa security, patuloy yung pag-iikot-ikot ng Pasig City Police at ilang mga barangay officials upang masiguro yung seguridad dito sa Pasig Mega Market dahil aminado sila ay talamak o uso daw talaga ang nakawan ngayon dito dahil nga holiday season at pagdating naman sa trapiko, mabigat na yung trapiko sa kalsada papasok dito sa Pasig Mega Market, particular sa Caruncho Avenue. Dani.
Thank you for that report and Happy New Year! Enjoy your Medianoche Mobile Journal. Jazz Paredes reporting to us from Pasig. And we now check on the latest passenger volume over at the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange. Our mobile journalist Evan Tarinque is reporting to us live at the land port. Madami bang tao there, especially this New Year's Eve, Evan?
Dani, sa mga oras nga ito, noticeable yung pagbawas o pagkonti ng mga pasahero dito sa Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange, so PITX. No? Mga oras nga na ito, may kita nyo sa aking likuran, iilan na lang yung mga pasaherong pumupunta dito sa loob ng terminal. Karamihan kasi umuwi na before noong bago pa magpasko. Yung ilan naman ng mga nakausap natin na pasahero, nagulat sila dahil sa luwag nga ng terminal. Tina-expect nga nila na talagang siksikan ngayong araw dahil nga last day at mag-celebrate yung ilang mga kapatid natin doon sa kanilang mga probinsya na naging positive naman para sa kanila na hindi ganun siksikan dahil nga na-maximize sila yung time nila at mabilis silang nakabili ng ticket. In terms of ticket, Dani, tinignan natin yung mga ticket booth sa loob ng terminal at halos wala na nga mga nakapila sa mga oras na ito. Pero paalala ng terminal na i-double check yung mga biyahe ng bus dahil may mga bus companies na hindi bumabiyahe ngayong araw at pati na rin bukas. No? Paalala na rin sa ating mga kapatid na pupunta dito sa terminal, ipinagbabawal pa rin yung pagdadala ng mga matutulis sa bagay, flammable materials at yung mga paputok dahil kahapon around 40 pieces na mga paputok yung na-confiscate ng mga otoridad at around 400 na yung mga ipinagbabawal na na-confiscate na ng mga otoridad at hindi na yan ibabalik sa mga may-ari at ito turn over na nga yan sa mga kapulisan. Dani, sa mga oras na ito, makita nyo naman patuloy yung pagpasok ng mga pasahero pero mas kukunti siya kung ikukumpara natin siya noong mga nakaraang araw. Dani?
All right, well, keep calm and safe travels home. That was mobile journalist Evan Tarinque live from PITX. Happy New Year, Evan. And trading will resume on Friday here in the Philippines. Let's take a look at markets overseas. The U.S. market slid yesterday, Tuesday, even after minutes from the Fed's December meeting reinforced hopes for a rate cut in 2026. Now, with no major catalyst as the year winds down, the Dow and the Nasdaq fell by 0.2%, while the S&P 500 declined by 0.1%. Benchmark 10-year Treasury yields ticked up to 4.13%, while gold prices climbed to $4,370 per ounce. U.S. futures are little changed when the markets open later tonight, Manila time, for the shortened trading. The Dow and the S&P 500 fall by 0.1%, while the Nasdaq slides by 0.25%. Australia's ASX 200 slips by about 0.1%, and it's a market holiday for both South Korea's Kospi and Japan's Nikkei 225. Over to corporate news. Pop Mart shares slid the most in 3 weeks. It's after reports of weakening reseller demand for its popular Labubu toys rattled investors. Shares of the Hong Kong-listed toy maker fell by as much as 6.2%, making it one of the worst performers on the MSCI Asia-Pacific Index. The decline followed reports that some scalpers paused purchases as prices in China's secondary market turned volatile, which is a sign of cooling demand. This adds to concerns that Pop Mart's once red-hot toy craze may be losing steam. That's after weaker-than-expected holiday sales data overseas. Shares are down about 44% since August, wiping out more than $25 billion in market value, though the stock remains up more than double this year. Pop Mart is now leaning on other characters to drive growth, including its Crybaby and Hirono lines. And that's it for Money Talks. Sitting in for Cathy Yang, I'm Danny Laurel. Catch us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time. Thank you for joining us this 2025. Have a great new year.